Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Governor Pritzker is preparing for a political showdown in D.C. where he'll testify about the state's protections for undocumented immigrants. Our Spotlight Politics team on what to expect. And Cook County forgives more than $600 million in medical debt for residents. A look at the impact it's having. And now to some of today's top stories. Immigrant advocates are rallying in Chicago today as the city joins other major cities across the country, taking action in solidarity with Los Angeles. Local activists demonstrated this afternoon near the Chicago Immigration Court with another protest this evening in Federal Plaza. Now, this comes as President Donald Trump sent Marines and National Guard troops to L.A. in response to protests over immigration raids, despite objections from California Governor Gavin Newsom. California has since filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over its use of the National Guard. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul issued a statement today in support of that lawsuit. Thousands of demonstrators are expected in Chicago this Saturday for a No Kings protest. It's the same day Trump will hold a military parade in D.C. for his birthday. An undocumented immigrant in Wisconsin is being released on bond now that a federal assassination case against him has fallen apart. In late May, the Department of Homeland Security accused 54-year-old Ramon Morales Reyes of sending a handwritten letter to an ICE officer threatening to assassinate President Trump. Secretary Kristi Noem shared the alleged letter and photos of Reyes in a post on X. But in a Chicago courtroom today, those claims unraveled as authorities quickly learned that Morales Reyes, who doesn't speak or write very well in English, was framed. A judge ordered his release from a Wisconsin prison, but he still faces deportation. A hiring freeze, budget reductions, and cutting merit salary increases are a few of the steps Northwestern University is announcing today to adjust to its new financial reality. In a letter sent to the Northwestern community, President Michael Schill and other leaders named several federal changes creating these fiscal challenges. Among them, a substantial increase in the endowment tax, a cap on international student enrollment, and the likely reduction in overall federal research funding. In part, the letter reads, quote, "We hope and are reasonably optimistic that these efforts to restore our federal funding will bear fruit, but we have asked our deans and other academic leaders to work with us to plan for a variety of scenarios in case they do not." Disgraced R&B singer R. Kelly is asking a judge to release him from prison just 3 years into his 30-year sentence. In court documents filed today, attorneys for Robert Kelly claim his life is in danger after officials from the Federal Bureau of Prisons plotted to murder the singer. Attorney Bo Brendley argues the plot was to cover up alleged theft of privileged attorney-client communications that were used to help convict Kelly. He's asking the court to allow him to be released on home detention. A spokesperson for the Bureau of Prisons declined to comment. Kelly is currently being held at a federal prison in North Carolina. Up next, how the Chicago Police Department is preparing for anti-Trump rallies planned for this weekend. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and much more.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Governor J.B. Pritzker prepares for a political showdown in D.C. Chicago braces for more protests against the Trump administration's immigration policies, and the end of the line for the Illinois politician once known as the Velvet Hammer. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Heather Sharon and Nick Blumberg. Welcome back, gang. So amid, of course, we've got these heightened tensions after the Trump administration's decision to send the National Guard as well as the Marines in response to these immigration protests in Los Angeles. This week, we've got Governor J.B. Pritzker testifying before Congress on Thursday, along with Governors Tim Walz of Minnesota and Kathy Hochul of New York, defending their state's sanctuary city policies. Heather, what is at stake for the governor of Illinois?
Well, the stakes are very high. We all know that Governor J.B. Pritzker is an ambitious politician. He may run for president in 2028. He may run for a third term in governor, and he has cast himself as a leading opponent of President Trump, mincing no words about the president's policies, likening them to Nazism and calling on residents to sort of mobilize and signal their opposition to the president. So this will give him a clear opportunity to stake out more of that ground and make it clear to Democrats who are looking for a politician who is prepared to take the fight to Republicans. He will get a chance to do just that and establish that ability right next to potentially maybe a competitor in Tim Walz, who of course was the vice presidential nominee with Kamala Harris in the 2024 election.
Okay, sitting next to each other should be fun to look at. Nick, Pritzker has said that he will defend the Illinois Trust Act. Exactly what does that law do?
That's right. The Trust Act blocks law enforcement from honoring federal immigration detainers or warrants unless they are signed off on by a judge. It also blocks law enforcement from making any stops or doing searches or making arrests solely based on someone's immigration or citizenship status. You know, the idea here is to make sure that residents feel comfortable calling 911 in an emergency so that they have, you know, relationships with their local police and fire departments if needed. Also to ensure that local law enforcement are not tackling federal issues like immigration. This is a legislation that, sort of gives us what's colloquially called being, a sanctuary state, largely mirrors what Chicago has in its own welcoming city ordinance. Now, what's interesting is that the Trust Act was signed into law in 2017 by Pritzker's predecessor, former Governor Bruce Rauner, who of course himself was a Republican. I'll be very curious to see whether that gets any mention in the hearing this week, although certainly the folks in the GOP who Pritzker will be going for are kind of a different breed of Republican than Rauner.
Yeah, not the same kind, exactly. Heather, Mayor Brandon Johnson, he made the same trip, of course, as we mentioned, back to Capitol Hill in March. What do you think the governor has learned or can learn from the mayor's experience?
Well, the mayor stayed on message. He had a series of sort of talking points that he was there to deliver, and he did so. He talked about how much crime was down in Chicago and how, in fact, the city's welcoming city ordinance does not stop ICE agents from executing those judicially authorized warrants. So if somebody is accused of a crime and that has been signed off after due process, nothing stands in the way. And at least a couple of Republicans were caught off guard by that because there is a lot of misinformation and some misunderstanding about what it means to be a sanctuary city and sanctuary state. I would imagine the governor is going to look to sort of exploit that sort of thing. And we will see if he's able to do that and probably deliver a few quips along the way.
Yeah, the zingers, we'll all be watching for those for sure. So there were some ICE raids and detentions here just last week, causing clashes between federal agents and protesters. Some of them, the city's aldermen as well. More protests, as we've mentioned, are planned for tonight. The big No Kings rally, which is an anti-Trump protest, is planned for the weekend. Nick, the last time Chicago was bracing for such large-scale protests like this was, of course, during the Democratic National Convention last summer. What experience, or what did that experience teach the police brass that they might be, using this time around?
Well, they had entirely new policies and procedures put into place after the massive racial justice protests that we saw in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, new mass arrest policies, new training things that officers went to. And to hear CPD tell it, the way the DNC went was, a rousing success. They felt like the work that they did allowed them to strike a balance between letting people demonstrate, have their voices heard, while maintaining public safety. Of course, there were other people who had a little bit more of a critical reaction to that. Folks like the National Lawyers Guild, they said these massive shows of force that we saw from CPD were more intended to intimidate. They said the department was making unnecessary arrests. But on the whole, during the DNC, I was out covering, multiple of those protests. They were huge, but they were almost entirely peaceful and orderly. You saw a lot of coordination between, protest leaders and, CPD officials that were on the ground. Of course, there were some smaller pop-up protests that happened that got a little more out of hand. There was a minor breach of the perimeter of the convention. But on the whole, CPD, they really had a lot of policies that they put in place here that they saw as successful and as something that they can use in the future for something like this No Kings protest.
Yeah. Heather, what do we know about what CPD is doing to prepare for these protests?
Well, they say they have already passed this test, as Nick said. So this is just a refresher course for officers. It is going to be a different sort of protest environment out there, because certainly you have sort of the big scheduled No Kings protests and everybody sort of knows when that's supposed to be and sort of where that's supposed to take place. But the issue with these sort of protests against specific ICE enforcement actions means that something can pop up almost immediately as the word goes out from sort of observers that ICE is moving to certain parts of the city. So I think what CPD has probably got to be on alert for now is sort of protests that they aren't anticipating, and that is going to be a challenge that the police department did not face during the Democratic National Convention.
It is something, though, that they faced in the summer of 2020, and I don't know about y'all, but this feels a little bit reminiscent of that when we know the heat, for lack of a better word, that CPD faced after their handling of that. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out in the next few days. In a courtroom on Friday, though, the hammer is set to come down on an Illinois politician once known as the Velvet Hammer. Lifetime of brokering these scenes behind the scenes, former House Speaker Michael Madigan is expected to be sentenced on Friday on his convictions of bribery, conspiracy, and wire fraud. Nick, how long do prosecutors say that he should be in prison?
They are looking for a 12-and-a-half-year prison term, saying his behavior was antithetical to what a public servant should be doing. Now, Madigan's already been in court this week, either trying to get a new trial or to get acquitted, which the judge pretty swiftly denied. His attorneys say that, to sentence an 83-year-old man to 12-and-a-half years behind bars would be draconian. They're looking for 5 years of probation, 1 year on, home confinement. But, his lawyers say that he wasn't making a penny for the things that he was convicted of doing. Now, the prosecutor's way of thinking, that doesn't quite hold water, given how much, business they said Madigan ginned up for his private law firm. They revealed in a court filing what they believe his personal net worth to be, which got his attorneys very upset. They had it successfully stricken from the record and said it was a gross breach of the rules. So with the judge denying Madigan's motion to either get a new trial or get acquitted entirely, he will be back on Friday to find out what the decision is there.
All eyes will be on that courtroom. About a minute left, Nick. Finally, the regional transit is facing, of course, as we've been covering here a lot, this $770 million budget shortfall. No help from Springfield just yet. CTA and RTA boards are meeting this week. What are you expecting?
Well, I think what they're going to have to do here is start to lay out a roadmap for how they're going to make these cuts. And I think, one transit expert I spoke to said they're going to be looking at probably multiple different scenarios. Each of these transit agencies, CTA, Metro, Pace, trying to figure out, here's some different options on the table, because of course, they've said they want to make sure that they can maintain service for people who need it most, folks who rely on paratransit, people who live in lower income communities and may not have access to cars. So they have a tough job ahead of them to plan for multiple scenarios. And also, you have to imagine they're going to be doing some planning for what if Springfield does come through with the money that we need, how do we make that happen? So
pretty sure they can spend it pretty quickly.
Right.
There are
a lot of questions that they have to answer. So we're going to start to see the roadmap there.
Okay. Nick Lumberg, Heather Sharon, thanks so much. See you next week.
Thank you.
But probably sooner. And we're back with more right after this.
We will get back to our program in just 2 minutes with a look at a local initiative that helped erase a mountain of medical debt. But first, we are asking for your help. You may have heard about the executive order to pull back appropriated funds to PBS and cut all funding in the future. We're here to ask you to consider doing two things: making a contribution to WTTW and letting your voice be heard in supporting public media. Now, PBS and WTTW have always had a partnership with you, our local audience, and that support is more critical now than it's ever been. As a WTTW and Chicago Tonight viewer, you understand the value of trusted local public media programming, including the journalism you get from Chicago Tonight as well as PBS NewsHour. Now, many of you have asked what you can do to help ensure that WTTW remains strong. So if this is something that's important to you, you can make your voice heard by contacting your member of Congress. You can learn the facts at WTTW.com/protectmypublicmedia and share those facts with your family and friends. And if it's right for you, you can donate to WTTW by calling 773-588-1111 or going to WTTW.com. You can also scan the QR code on your screen. Your contribution at whatever level you choose is always appreciated, but what's most important is that you participate. This is public media, and it's our members that keep us strong today and into the future. Here's what some of you, our viewers, have written in to tell us. This is my primary source of unbiased news. It's also a primary location for my grandchildren's positive viewing. WTTW and PBS are my choice for fact-based, unbiased news, along with a great amount of entertaining and educational programming. It's information I know I can trust. PBS is very important for me for showing the real facts and news around the world without false narratives. We hope you find value in what we do here at WTTW News, Chicago Tonight, and throughout the day and night on WTTW. Please consider supporting us in whatever way feels right to you. We are in this together. Thank you. Chicago Tonight returns in a moment.
For many American families, medical debt can be devastating. According to recent data from the Kaiser Family Foundation, 41% of adults in the U.S. have medical debt. That equates to more than 100 million Americans who owe upwards of $220 billion in healthcare costs. Cook County launched the Medical Debt Relief Initiative in 2022 in an effort to help residents with the burden. Today, the program has erased $665 million in medical debt for nearly 557,000 Cook County residents. Joining us with more are Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, and joining us via Zoom, Courtney Werpy-Story, Vice President of Government Initiatives at Undo Medical Debt, a nonprofit that works to erase medical debt. Thanks to you both for joining us. Madam President, I want to start with you. $665 million.
More than $500 million, yes.
More than $500 million, yes. To what do you attribute that success?
Well, first of all, I want to express my appreciation for the opportunity to share this good news with our viewers. Undo Medical Debt is our partner. This is work they've done around the country with philanthropy. And we discovered it and decided that we would try to do it as a government entity. And we used our American Rescue Plan Act resources, the money that Joe Biden and Congress allocated to help governments respond to the pandemic, to provide this relief for our residents. And again, $665 million for 555,000 residents of Cook County.
It's a lot of people. For whom I'm sure it means a lot for that to be forgiven.
Yeah, you know, one of the main reasons people declare bankruptcy is they can't pay their medical debt. And it disproportionately impacts communities of color, black and brown communities. They have higher rates of medical debt than the majority in this country. And as a result of these efforts, you know, that burden, that stress has been relieved for people, eliminated. And I'm grateful to, as I said, Undo Medical Debt, which is our partner in this work.
Courtney, we have talked about this issue on this program before. How does it work? Explain it for us, please, buying medical debt.
Yeah, so we work directly with hospitals in the secondary market to purchase medical debt in bulk. Once we do that, we forgive it. So we purchase that debt for typically pennies on the dollar. And if we have that debt and you meet our program qualifications, you will receive a letter in the mail letting you know that that debt is no longer owed. Pretty simple. That's really it.
Yeah, pretty simple. So, you know, you buy it for less than it is worth, right? So I guess I'm trying to understand how this works for hospitals, because $665 million, that's the debt, but no one spent $665 million.
Correct. So we typically purchase debt that is older or considered uncollectible by hospitals. So they are not technically actively collecting on it, but it is still owed, and the individual still knows that that debt is out there and owed by them. So we work with hospitals to purchase that debt just in a similar way that they would sell it to a secondary market collector, which are those collectors that will then try to call you, put you on a payment plan, and then collect on that debt. We won't do that. We will just purchase that debt and then forgive it.
So pennies on the dollar. So if I owe a hospital $10,000 and you all purchase that debt, approximately how much might you pay for it, just to give folks a sense of how it works?
Yeah, typically for our government partners, $1 of government funding equates to $167 of medical debt relief, and that'd be $1.67 that we would pay for that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Madam President, give us a sense of, you know, we've talked about it a little bit, about how vast the problem of medical debt is.
Well, first of all, I believe in universal health care. This is the richest country in the world, and the idea that folks can't get good medical care because they can't pay insurance rates, you know, is ridiculous. And I am grateful to Undo Medical Debt for helping us kind of level the playing field here. Until such time as we have universal health care, we have to do everything we can to support our residents and ensure that they have access to care and that it's not a burden to them financially.
Who qualifies for this?
You'll have to talk to Undo Medical Debt about the algorithms they use to determine eligibility. But I am very grateful to them. This is work they've done around the country, and we're grateful for the work they've done here in Cook County.
Of course, and so we've got a quick graphic on screen. Obviously, you have to be a Cook County resident. Your income must be up to 400% of the federal poverty level and 5% or more of household income in medical debt. Madam President, we also have data. So Cook County data that's collected by Undo Medical Debt. It shows where the value of debt that has been erased is the greatest in Cook County. And on this map, the dark blue and the turquoise locations, that is where the dollar amount is the greatest amount owed. What does this tell you when you look at this information?
Well, I always say, you know, if you look at the county, there's sort of one map. No matter what you're looking at, if you're looking at poverty rates or unemployment or food deserts, and the burden of medical debt reflects that same pattern. And we see on the west side and the south side and the south suburbs that there has been a significant impact of the program, which means those folks were disproportionately burdened with medical debt.
Right, which means it also tells us that largely our communities of color are experiencing this medical debt.
That's right.
Courtney, we also have data from, of course, from your organization, from Undo Medical Debt, showing that more than 100 million adults owe upwards of $220 billion. 7 in 10 adults can't afford to pay medical bills. 55% of adults defer medical care. Give us a sense of what people are struggling with or are challenged by when they've got medical debt this hefty. Like, what else is not working out for them? What are they missing out on?
Yeah, we know that medical debt causes folks to delay seeking care. So if they have a problem, they will not go to the doctor when that problem is more easily treatable. So by the time they are seeking care, it is going to be more complex and more costly. We know that individuals don't have at least $500 for a medical emergency. So we know that if something happens, you are going to have to go seek care. And then you're going to have to make difficult decisions about what bills you're going to pay. Are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to be able to feed your family? And how are you going to get that care that you need? We know that medical debt is not a debt of choice, it's a debt of necessity. And we need to make sure that folks feel comfortable and safe accessing care, and that the way that we finance healthcare in this country isn't causing them unnecessary mental stress.
The state has a similar program. What are some of the challenges in getting this going? Madam President, I'm going to come to you first on that, but Courtney, I know that you all work with other government agencies as well.
I think Undo Medical Debt is a partner with the state as well. So we have the same provider of this service. And, you know, I just want to express my appreciation to the health agencies that have worked with us. Advent, Loyola, the University of Chicago, Sinai, St. Anthony recently joined us, Vacuity. So we've got lots of partners in this work, and we're really grateful we couldn't do it without those partnerships. And you know, undue medical debt is doing this now in a number of places in the country. We were the first government entity to do it, but not just our state, but units of government across the country have now begun this work.
Courtney, why aren't more, or how can you get more local and state government agencies to replicate this, to do this as well?
Yeah, we actually are working with over 25 cities, counties, and states across the country, and more are expressing interest in working with us every day. So we're really excited about that. We do think it's a really easy value proposition for governments. The return on investment and the impact to the communities is just so great. And we encourage everybody that's interested in working with us to reach out. You know, we're happy to explain more about how we work, how our model works, and how it can be impactful in your community.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. $665 million. It's a great deal of money. Congrats to you all and the folks whose debt has been forgiven, of course. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, Courtney Warpy-Story, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. You can stream Chicago Tonight on our WTTW YouTube channel every evening and catch up on any programs you may have missed. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. We explore the challenges facing many Black fathers and what's being done to help support them. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that serves the needs of clients in the Chicago area and throughout the nation.